No, absolutely. We thought we were preparing for one of those embarrassing moments in English football, all preparing for the miserable post-mortems of the last 16 exit. Instead, everyone here now preparing for a fourth consecutive quarter-final under Gareth Southgate. Behind me, some of those players who didn't make it onto the pitch last night are now part of a training session. Those who are part of such a memorable comeback, enjoying a bit of rest and recovery as they now count down the 5 days until the game against Switzerland in that quarter-final. But what a moment it was last night. All hope was lost. We encountered fans leaving the stadium in Gelsenkirchen, abandoning the team, thinking it was all hope was lost. But then that moment of magic from Jude Bellingham, the overhead kick, saving the day, sending things into extra time. And I've got to say, when we entered extra time, I started to think, is this game going to go to penalties? Is this going to be one of those agonising long evenings for England? But no, within a minute of the restart in extra time, Harry Kane popped up with the header. And it was set up by Ivan Toney, who'd only just come on at the end of the 90 minutes plus injury time. He was being brought on a bit disgruntled to be sort of brought on so late, too late to make an impact, but he certainly did have time to do so. So really, Bellingham and Kane, the saviours for England, but the performance was not up to scratch, and it really has reflected how things have been so far here in Germany through the group stage. But most importantly, England do have the result required. They secured it, and they secured their passage through to the quarter-finals. So now some of those players will be behind me trying to perhaps talk their way into contention, back into contention in the case of Trent Alexander-Arnold. He's someone out there who originally started games at this tournament, and other players who will be hoping to feature in Gareth Southgate's plans for a journey that they still hope will go all the way through to Berlin and the final. Well, that's what will now be being assessed, because his substitutions did make an impact last night. There were questions why Gareth Southgate took so long to make the changes in the second half when the game was just running away from England. They were so ragged, they were unable to create any chances at all. There wasn't a shot on target, I don't think, until actually Bellingham did score the equaliser. That just showed how much of a struggle it was to get these talented players gelling and clicking as a team. So it'll probably be just assessing who actually does now come in for the start. Does Mainu start, having been introduced into the starting lineup for the game against Slovakia? He does have one change that he has to make, which is in defence, because Mark Gahey was booked within 3 minutes of the match, so he's now got a one-match suspension. So he's going to have to look at the defence. Will Luke Shaw perhaps be fit enough to start, to even play? He arrived here injured at the tournament, but he's not managed to feature at all, so the hope he might get some minutes. But I think the general mood here at the camp is one of absolute relief, the fact that they're still in this tournament, and now with a quarter-final against Switzerland to look forward to on Saturday. Thanks.
They're now running you. They're running your people leaving.
So it's a light training session we're watching here at the moment. The players who weren't involved in last night's victory over Slovakia, so we aren't getting a chance to see Jude Bellingham here today, nor Harry Kane, the two scorers. Perhaps some welcome rest for them after being such key figures last night in the end to turn it around to secure that victory. And some of the players who we are seeing, familiar face, of course, Trent Alexander-Arnold, who originally started. He started the first game, particularly against Serbia. That was the only previous victory here. And the other players we're seeing, Dee Henderson, Aaron Ramsdale, they're the goalkeeping options. Ollie Watkins, who came on earlier in the tournament and certainly showed how he can make an impact off the bench up front. We've also got Lewis Dunk, Joe Gomez, perhaps he will come into defence. Luke Shaw as well, the Manchester United left-back, who has been out injured since February, still back to come to this tournament by Gareth Southgate with the hope he could recover in time to feature later on in the tournament. Well, this is the time for him to perhaps to show he is fit enough now. He's missed the first 4 games, but could potentially now be getting his way into contention to feature in the quarter-final. They've really been missing perhaps the impact he could make down the left side, where there's been a sense of an imbalance in this team. To continue down, who else we're seeing here? Adam Wharton, one of the Crystal Palace contingent, Jared Bowen as well, and Anthony Gordon, who of course, the last we saw him last week was actually a bit of an injury picked up on a bike ride here on one of the recreational days. He was actually on his phone at the time and was riding around this area in the Weimar area in the east of Germany. And he did cut his chin, so it was very visibly seen with the scars of that the other day, and then didn't feature yesterday in the match. And finally, the other player we're seeing somewhere out there at the moment is Conor Gallagher, who is the Chelsea midfielder who did actually come into the starting lineup for the previous match against Slovenia. He actually replaced Trent Alexander-Arnold in midfield, but didn't have the required input that perhaps many hoped for, and he was actually brought off at half-time, and that's when we saw the introduction of Kobbie Mainoo, and certainly Mainoo did enough to convince Gareth Southgate to keep him and start him this time for his first England start in a major tournament, just 99 days after making his England debut. And what a breakthrough season it has been for Mainoo. He only made his Manchester United debut last season as well, but certainly has shown how as a teenager he's got the opportunities for his club and then forced his way into contention for England too. So there we see the group of players out in the grass. We're told the other players are doing some recovery work away from this main session. We are hoping to speak to one of the players very shortly, one of the players who was part of that incredible turnaround last night against Slovakia. We were leaving the stadium ourselves, ready to talk about what we thought would be another embarrassing episode to go along with the Euro 2016 last 16 defeat to Iceland. Instead, we encountered fans who were leaving, who'd given up all hope, and then we had to inform some of them that that roar they heard from behind was in fact an equaliser, and the day had been saved by Jude Bellingham a day after his 21st birthday to send things into extra time, when of course Harry Kane then popped up with his header. And perhaps it was unsurprising after that bicycle kick, it was Jude Bellingham named man of the match, and it meant we heard from him after the game, where he certainly reflected on some of the pressures of playing for England and that sense of some of the criticism that he has felt, and why he wanted to perhaps send a message back out to some of those who were questioning his own performances so far, with even suggestions it was perhaps time to drop him from the starting lineup because he was showing signs of fatigue. But certainly what we got a sense from Bellingham when we heard from after the game was just the surety that he does speak with, and that sense of sort of confidence as a 21-year-old. And you know, he talks about how it's so proud playing for his country, but they really do feel the intense pressure of how fans expect so much. And at the same time, he can feel, as he put it, a bit of a pile on that isn't nice to hear. So that's why he said perhaps it's nice to throw it back to some people sometimes, and that's perhaps why we saw his comments post-match really relishing the moment, and what a moment of sublime skill it was. I think we could be seeing that goal for many years to come, particularly if England do make it all the way here to the final in Berlin as we enter the final 2 weeks of this tournament. But it has been, of course, for all the gloom, a successful 8-year period for many for Gareth Southgate. This is his 4th consecutive quarter-final, obviously trying to match the highs of reaching the final in 2021 when they lost to Italy on penalties, but no Italy standing in their way this time. Of course, Italy dumped out by Switzerland, who await England on Saturday. Of course, some familiar names in that Switzerland side. Granit Xhaka, nonetheless, former Arsenal player who is actually fresh off winning the Bundesliga so unexpectedly here in Germany with Bayer Leverkusen. So certainly there will be a notable threat from the Swiss. They have made it this far, but of course, like England, they didn't win all their group stage games either, so that will give certainly England some hope as they do look forward. I've got to say, this is my first time out here to the England base. We're out in East Germany. We've travelled ourselves 4 hours from the west where England were playing. We were in Gelsenkirchen last night, and this is quite a remote training base. So it's perhaps something that is more reminiscent of their camps that they had at the 2016 Euros in France, in Chantilly. In 2018 in Russia, they were based near St. Petersburg in Rupino. The next Euros, of course, was largely at home, still based at their St. George's Park HQ. But it is sort of moving back to the more of a remote base away from 2014 when they were sort of more in the heart of Brazil. So they'll certainly be hoping to be staying here for a lot of time to come, the next 2 weeks, and hoping it all ends in glory. But this is our look at the warm down, those players who weren't featuring last night, as we now look ahead to this quarter-final with Switzerland.